Alright, so this is going to be the question mystery reverse environment diagram, and this is the optional question on the discussion worksheet. And so what this is, it's a reverse environment diagram. So, they give us the environment diagram right here, and they want us to, find like fill in the blanks so that like the environment diagram that the function outputs is equal to this. And so considering like what we have in our code so far, what we want to consider first is what the environment diagram looks like right now. And so what happens is we're going to define a mystery right here. It corresponds to mystery pointing to some function. And then we're going to define the list P to be the elements 2, 3. So this is what it looks like right there. And along with that, we're going to say that Q is a list with the elements 4. And then the second element is going to be another list. So we're pointing to a box right there. And inside of that list, there's only one element, and that element is going to be P. Well, what's P? P is pointing to the list 2, 3, so that one element inside of this list right here is going to be P. And then after that, we have like a mystery call of that function we just defined, and we need to figure out like what do we put in those parameters and like what do we put in the body of the mystery function. And so if we first want to think about like what differences do we have so far? And so if we look at like this environment diagram compared to like the environment diagram we have so far, there are like a few differences that we can take note of. First of all, like mystery is the same, so we're probably not going to change that later on. But if we think about like what P and Q are, there are a couple differences. First of all, P has this like extra box right here. I'm going to draw it. So like an extra box right here that points to, so like that's another element of P's list that we want to like add on. And we have another box right here. So that element that we're adding on is going to be a list. And in particular, that list is going to contain like this list right here, because you see like the arrow is pointing to the list with the elements 2 or 3 at the end. So this is like what we're missing in terms of P. And then as for what Q is missing, we're missing 2 elements in this index element of Q. So the first index element of Q. So we're missing the 2, 3 right here. So I'm going to draw dotted lines right here, 2, 3. And so the question is, how do we like fill in the blanks so that we get like what we want? And so if we think about like what we have in our skeleton code, we have the extend function and we have the append function. And if you think about it, we can't really fit any more extends or appends or any kind of like list mutation in these lines. So that's like kind of all we have to like add elements to the list. And if we think about like what we want in P and Q, so for P, we only want to add one element at a time. And so because of that, in addition to that, like for Q, we want to add the elements 2 and 3. And so Q, we want to add multiple elements, and P, we're going to only add one element. And so we can only use like append and extend. If we think about like what append does, append is only going to add one item, and extend can add like multiple items. And so in that case, maybe for the bottom list where we want to add the 2, 3, that's the list that we're calling extend on. And for the P list, so the 2, 3 list, we're going to be calling append on that. And so if we think about like what parameters we want to pass in, so P of 1, we want the P indexed at 1 to refer to like that list right here. And we know that index 1, the first index of the Q variable, so like the list 4 and that list there, at index 1 is referring to that list in which we want to add the elements 2 and 3. So it should probably be, P should probably be Q. And like one thing to know about this is that, all the like P and Q are like the same, named the same variables, like have the same names as the one in the global frame. They're going to be different because when we like define parameters in like a function call, like it creates its own variables inside of the environment frame. So in this case, we're going to assign the P in mystery to be the Q in the global frame. So that essentially is going like Q indexed at 1 dot extend, and we want to add the elements 2 and 3. And so along with that, we need to figure out, how do we get the elements 2 and 3? Because we can't just straight up put the list 2, 3 right here, because it says you may only use brackets, colons, P and Q in your answer. And so if we look at what we have so far, we notice that P is going to be the list 2, 3. And it turns out like that's exactly what we want, right? We want the elements 2, 3 added onto it. And so that means we also have to include like the variable p in there. And in this case, we're gonna pass in the p as the q variable in the function, which is kind of weird. So if we pass in p, q is going to be referring to the p right here, and p is going to be referring to the q right there, which is kind of like a mix-up, but hopefully that makes sense. And so we're gonna extend all the elements of, so like the elements 2 and 3 to the end of this list right here. And that's why we're going to put q right here. So now we kind of have this done. So the elements 2 and 3 have been added on. And now what's left for us to do is, we want to add the remaining like dashed lines. So right here in particular. And we know we're going to have to do that via like the append method in the next line. And so if you think about like what we want to append onto, we want to append onto the list P because we want to add an extra element to the end of like the 2, 3. And that element is going to be like a list pointing to the list 2, 3. Like the bottom list that we just like added onto. And so keeping that in mind, it's probably going to be the variable like P that we're adding onto. So like this list right here. But remember that it's this is confusing once again, but in the mystery function, we refer to that P list as Q because we passed in the P as a parameter, and that's like linked right there. And so in that case, we're going to put a Q right here. And so we're a Q.append of like some something indexed at 1 beyond. So we're splicing that list. And so since we're splicing it from like, since we're splicing something, that element has to be a list. And what do we want that splice to be equal to? We want it to be equivalent to, remember, the list pointing to this list down here. And because the reason behind that is that we want the element to be like this thing right here. And the thing about that is we have to think about, what can we splice to get like all the elements except for the first one to be like this list right here. And so thinking about that, we know that this element should be like the only element in the list because the reasoning behind that is, we may have a list, and then if we're going to splice it from like, this is list, I'm going to splice it from 1 beyond, this would be equivalent to the list 1 right here. And so because of that, it has to have 2 elements, and the second element should be pointing to the list right here. I'm making a lot of circles, but the second element should be this list right here. And what we notice about that is that Q is going to be the list that we want, like this Q right here in the global frame. And so because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to append Q spliced at 1 beyond. Well, as a matter of fact, we don't want Q. I got confused. We want P. Because remember that inside the mystery function, the P variable refers to Q. And so yeah, that's going to be the solution to the environment diagram problem. And I'm going to put it in Python Tutor to show how it works. So p1.extend q, q.append p, and q, and p. And let's go. All right, and so if we see what happens right here, we're going to start off by defining the mystery function, and then we're going to define p and q. And remember that q has like 2 elements. One is 4, another is pointing to a list that has the list p within it. And so that's why we have all of these pointers. And then next we're going to call the mystery function, and we're going to pass in q as the first parameter and p as the second parameter. And so p is going to be pointing to like the q in the global frame. Q is going to be pointing to p in the global frame. And so we're going to add on the elements of q to the end of this list right here. And so we're going to add on 2, 3 right there. And then we're going to run q.append a p of 1 beyond. Well, what is p spliced at the index 1 beyond? It's going to be a list containing this element right here. It's like, because like we make our like cutoff right here. And so if we append the spliced list, we're going to add on to the end of p. P right here. And so you see right here, we added the element, so like 2, 3, and it's pointing to a list, which points to this list right here. And it kind of like looks kind of weird compared to like what you saw on your environment diagram, but it is the same. There's just like a lot of lines intercrossing in this one. But yeah, that's going to be Mr. Reverse Environment Diagram. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at patwing123@berkeley.edu. Yeah, have a great day.